All right, it is 3:16, so I say let's get started. And welcome everyone to the Sustainable Cleveland 2020 Virtual Summit. We sure wish we could be seeing your lovely faces in person this year, but this seems to be working out as a very good alternative for us this year. Again, welcome to the air quality breakout session. My name is Patti. I am the Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Cleveland. I will be kind of overseeing everything and collecting questions. So if you have any questions, put them into the chat box down below on your right, and we will try to do our best to address them all by the end of the session. Do ask if you have the option to remain muted, just for any possible interference issues. Our moderator for today is Whitney Long-Jones, Organizing and Engagement Manager for Ohio City Incorporated, a Community Development Corporation, who will kick off and introduce our other presenters. So with that, I turn it over to Whitney.
Thank you so much, Patti. I am honored to be here, and I'm super excited to engage in this conversation with two folks that I am familiar with, Christina and Tim. So this panel discussion is air quality in Cleveland, and air quality may mean different things to different people within the city or a neighborhood. Factors like where you live, your age, your race, your health, and your occupation can significantly impact what comes to mind when you think of air quality. In this panel discussion, you'll hear different perspectives on air quality in Cleveland and learn more about how local agencies and organizations are helping to monitor and improve the air that we breathe. So as Patti said, my name is Whitney. I'll be moderating this panel, and just a little bit about what I do at Ohio City Inc. is as the Organizing and Engagement Manager. I work with our diverse population of residents in Ohio City to find out what the needs are, find out how residents want to engage with each other, want to engage with the organization. We support resident-led projects. We engage with a diverse community of stakeholders and do our best to connect people to resources. So I will let our panelists introduce themselves. And Christina, we can start with you.
I already did it. I was on mute and I tried to speak.
You were.
But thank you, Whitney. My name is Christina Yoka, and I am the Chief of Air Pollution Outreach at the Cleveland Department of Public Health Division of Air Quality. I've worked with a lot of my fellow panelists here on different initiatives, including working with Whitney on air quality issues within Ohio City Inc. And you'll hear from Tim as well. And I've worked with him on a variety of air quality concerns throughout the region. So thank you. I look forward to being a part of this presentation today.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Tim, if you'd introduce yourself, please.
I'm Tim Kovach. I'm the air quality planner at the Northeastern agency.
It's a little quiet, Tim. Is it the volume or?
Can you hear me better? Is that better?
No?
No?
That's better. Okay.
I'll repeat. Tim Kovach, the air quality planner with NOACA, the Northeast Ohio Areawide Coordinating Agency. We're the metropolitan planning organization for the region. Do more in my presentation, but one of the areas we focus on is air quality for mobile persons. So worrying about coming out of the tailpipes and things of that nature. And that's my purview. So I'll delve into that in my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you both. So let's talk a little bit about some of the projects that both of your organizations are working on. And if you're aware of any of the projects that are happening locally or within the region, and what are some of the successes that you've noticed from the projects you're working on, and some of the difficulties you have when it comes to engaging community? So I know that was probably like a three-part question. So first, maybe you can just tell us some of the projects that your organizations are working on.
Sure.
And just jump in.
All righty, I'll just jump in. So the Cleveland Division of Air Quality is the local air agency for Cuyahoga County. We're delegated through Ohio EPA to oversee the and to ensure that the rules of the Clean Air Act for stationary sources of pollution are being enforced. So we monitor facilities, we do inspections, and we respond to citizen complaints. Now, I think that, you know, what your question was alluding to is what are some of the challenges that we have with air quality? And I think that when it comes to the public, I think it's that a lot of people don't know that we're here. A lot of the people in the community don't know that there is a resource here that you can contact if you have an air quality concern. Now, we have to work within the confines of what's within the federal rules, the state rules, and our local ordinances. But if you notice something going on in your community, you need to know about it. We have a big service area, and we can't be everywhere. So we depend on the people in the community to alert us about those issues. Just one area that we have a challenge with.
Yeah, and as soon as Tim shares some of the projects that NOAC is working on, I'll be happy to add to them, because I can speak directly to that, having worked with Christina. So Tim, share some of the projects that NOAC is working on at this moment.
Sure. So as I mentioned, what we're focused on in terms of air quality is mobile sources, and so that's the main focus of our work. Although we do also have a component where I keep tabs of regional air quality trends and how we're complying or not complying with the US EPA standards. And so we're currently going through a number of different things. So one thing that we do is try to promote alternatives for people to driving alone for individuals and organizations. And so we're currently hosting our annual Commuter Choice Awards, where we have organizations compete against one another to see what types of sustainable commuting policies and projects that they implement. And we're currently doing a challenge on our transportation demand management platform, Go High. Organizations are competing directly against one another throughout the month of October. And so that's one thing that we put a lot of attention on. Also working on our annual air quality trends report that I put out each year. And that includes just an analysis of the most recent calendar year's data, as well as I do an analysis of greenhouse gas emissions from mobile sources in the region. And for the next report, which should come out in the spring, for the first time, I analyze public health impacts of air quality in the region using a model that USDA has provided. So that's some exciting work that we're able to put out there. And then we're also in the process of developing our long-range plan. So as an MPO, we have to put out basically a 20-year strategy for transportation projects in the region. And we're in the process of putting that together. And we're going to look at how we want the region to look 2050. And so that's going to be a big component of a big strategy, bold vision to look like. That includes more than just transportation, but also housing, land use, and things of that nature. And as a part of that, I'm working with our modeling team to try to look at how the transportation, the different strategies, different scenarios that we're looking at will affect air quality and will affect environmental justice populations throughout the region.
That's awesome. I'm really glad that you brought up environmental justice, because I think that ties in really well when we're trying to engage communities. Because if we look at the history of the country, we know that there have been populations that have been excluded from opportunities and have had limited access to resources. So when we look at redlining, you know, there are specific populations of people that live in neighborhoods that may be, that are adversely affected by companies that are built near their neighborhoods that affect the air quality. I'll share with you specifically in Ohio City, we've been working with the residents at Lakeview Terrace near West 25th and Detroit Avenue to, you know, address some of the air quality issues that have been going on for decades right in that neighborhood. You know, when that building has been there, that complex, that housing complex has been there since the 1930s. And then when we had the Shoreway Wall built in the 60s, so, you know, we're dealing with gas emissions, diesel emissions from vehicles that are constantly driving right around where these residents live. And there are industries in the area that give off particulate matter, you know, and people's respiratory systems have been affected, breathing issues, children being born with asthma. So we've been working with residents at Lakeview to address some of these poor air quality concerns. As I stated earlier, I worked with Christina. Tim came to a public meeting that we held in early 2018. And I'd really like to hear from both of you when we started that process. Now, mind you, it's been going on for years, so I don't want to take all the credit, but I joined Ohio City Inc. in November 2017. And that's been a project on my plate since I've been with the organization. And, you know, when I called Christina from the Department of Public Health to come and share the information, the steps that residents can take to begin to address these issues, we got some pretty good activity, feedback, response in the very beginning. But as time progressed, you know, sometimes people feel that their voices aren't being heard. Then, you know, they say, forget it, I'm going to stop trying. And that's the reality of the situation that we're dealing with in Ohio City. So, Christina, can you speak a little bit to the coding, you know, that's enforced by Department of Public Health, that's put out there? How are I'm trying to think of how to add this question. Maybe I'll just let you explain, because you're familiar with the whole process and some of the struggles that we've been dealing with when it comes to engaging the community. Can you give us some perspective on that?
So this was actually, I'd have to say, I joined the Cleveland Department of Public Health in February of 2018. And this was one of my, even though I knew Whitney from prior years, this was actually one of my first projects when I joined the team in terms of engaging the community. So as she mentioned, we came together, there was a public health meeting in which I attended, Tim was there, we had a couple of our enforcement staff on site. The issues that they're dealing with in the area that she is referring to, they have multiple facilities and different types of building structures that have piles of sand, piles of salt, and piles of other type of material that are particulates. So what happens is that, as you can imagine, just think about the wind blowing across the beach. When the wind comes in, it blows the particulates from those piles, and then that gets into the community. This specific area is also kind of a sink. So I would say, like, I haven't actually looked at the dispersion modeling, but I would say that it also probably holds onto the air. The air becomes a little bit stagnant. The facilities that are down there all have to have certain types of permits. The permits are issued at the local level. So we have the City of Cleveland local air pollution control laws. And this is a code of ordinances that were adopted in 1977. And there are various factors and various items that are included in there. So they're responsible for meeting those guidelines. But then these facilities also have state and federal permits. The state and federal permits are the rules that have been enacted by the Clean Air Act, that any facility that emits anything into the air above certain levels, these are the guidelines that they have to follow. So the types of control measures that need to be put in place are included within the different permits that they have. So for the types of pollutants that I'm referring to, there are different things that they can do to control those pollutants. They could put a tarp over the pile. They can water down the piles. There are chemical sources that they can use to apply, but I don't think that they use that at any of those facilities to suppress the emissions. But they're required to do this on a daily basis. The other thing that they're required to do is that, although our division isn't responsible for mobile source emissions, if facilities have vehicle traffic that is leaving the premises and they're pulling out dirt and debris onto the roadways, that is a violation of City of Cleveland ordinances. So that was something else that we had observed that was happening at these facilities. These are all dirt roads, they're not paved. And so as the vehicles leave, the dirt just picks up and accumulates in their wheels, and then that gets dragged out onto the city roadways. So some of the things, you know, that we have to do. And, you know, as I mentioned, one of the challenges is that we have to know when things are happening. So when Whitney brought me out, when the team invited me to participate in this, we did go out and we observed several violations that were going on within different facilities there. And what we observed was that certain areas were not covering the piles. They were not cleaning up the roadways. And all of this continued to contribute to the air emission units that were going on, or the air emission problems that were happening. So jumping forward to where we are today, I mean, any applicable rules, you know, we're going to have to apply them across the board for any facility, regardless of where you are. But this is knowing when the facility when facilities might first respond well. If then they start trailing off, you know, miss an inspection that day, or start to miss inspections, or start to not clean up their piles, that's when we need to be made aware of it so that we can go out and conduct an inspection. We also are required to do, based off the facility type, inspections at different intervals of time. So we will inspect a facility based off of the amount of emissions that amount of emissions. But those times just vary in terms of when we're actually when we are required for their permit to go out there and do the inspections. So that's where we ask from the community, is that if you notice that these things are occurring in your community, that you see that drag out, you smell that smoke, you see that dust accumulation, this is where we need your help in terms of identifying that we need to get out there and see if anything is happening that we have within the rules and within our tool set, we're able to address it.
That's great. And then that really feeds into what I was saying earlier. So even though the resources are there, there's a lot of work that needs to be done when looking at something from someone else's perspective. You know, there's a history of being unheard, you know, specifically the population of low income, you know, people of color. So if someone is calling constantly and, you know, nothing is taking effect to the degree that they feel it should happen, they're eventually going to say, well, what's the point? You know, I have other priorities and ways to spend my time. So we just have to keep going at it, working at it, Christina. So I appreciate everything that you've done. There's also other resources that we've referred to our residents. Tim, can you talk a little bit about how NOACA tracks, you know, the air quality and puts information out there on a regular basis?
Mentioned products that I produce each year as a report, air quality trends in the region, and that comes out each spring. And I pull direct CPA and then analyze that, as well as doing my own development of mobile source emissions of greenhouse gases to kind of look at how climate change affects the region as well. In addition to that, we're in a little bit of a difficult position because I actually had a coworker who did outreach and engagement work. We developed an outreach strategy around public education for air quality over the past few years, but she took another position in the summer, so we've been trying. That's kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit as we try to replace her. But we recognize the importance of educating the public about air quality. The fact that we do have a problem with air quality in this region, the fact that it has impacts on different populations, whether that be people of color, the elderly, children, or people with respiratory illnesses. So we know that that's a major issue. And NOACA is really trying to incorporate those considerations into our work. So you may have seen in the news over the weekend that our policy committee just approved a policy to require all new freeway interchanges to incorporate economic and racial equity considerations in the analyses. That's the first time. I think we're actually the first MPO in the country, to my knowledge, that has done something like that. Don't hold me to that if somebody else has, but that's my understanding. And that will also obviously incorporate environmental justice and air quality concerns, because we know that mobile sources are the prime driver of regional air quality issues here. We're also working on trying to really engage with environmental justice communities and communities of color, because we do know that they're the ones who bear the biggest burden from mobile sources of air pollution. The average Black neighborhood is about 2.5 times more likely to live with high of mobile pollution than the average white neighborhood. And so that's a long entrenched division that's due to years of, bulldozing black neighborhoods for freeways, racial segregation through redlining and land use as a government that understandably create a lot of trust issues between an agency like NOACA or the Cleveland Division of Air Quality when we come and ask you how we can engage with you if you've lived through 50 years in which the federal government, your MPO, your city has not only ignored your concerns but has actually dramatically exacerbated them. Then it's very understandable why you may not want to engage with an organization like ours. And so it's a difficult process to try to repair that trust. It's something we've been working on over the past several years and will continue to do so. And it's a major consideration that we're taking into account as we go through the development of this long-range plan over 2050. I'm actually going to drop a link into the chat. We've put together this kind of interactive tool to identify individuals' priorities for the region. So
I think you muted yourself accidentally, Tim.
Yep. On the chat box.
And you did it again.
Sorry about that. So I just dropped that link into the chat box. But anybody who has not taken that tool yet, please do so. And then please also share that with your constituents and your friends and your colleagues. We really want to see a much greater level of engagement of environmental justice communities, people of color, younger people. When you do these types of public engagement efforts as a public entity, you usually get the same kind of middle-aged, college-educated white men. And that gives you very skewed results in a city like Cleveland, where it's majority black, and we have a much younger population. So we're doing our best, but it's a difficult process, and we have a lot of understandable distrust built up that we have to try to shave away.
That's awesome. So since you're sharing links, there's also a link that NOACA has where you can check the air quality on a regular basis. Let me correct me if I'm wrong. That's NOACA, or is that CDPH? Or both? Do you both have?
NOACA does the regional air quality forecasting. So my boss, Joe McDonald, does the analysis every day to say whether or not we're expecting air quality levels to be dangerous for ground level matter. And then we report that to US EPA, and they put it up on their airnow.gov website so that you can get that kind of real-time information. And we also send that out so that if we're projecting in the summer months high levels of ozone, we'll send that out. It's going to go to US EPA. It's going to go to the local news agencies. Any individual can sign up for that on our website. And we also send it out to the National Weather Service so that they can make sure that meteorologists are getting that in.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Christina, I saw you getting ready to say.
Yeah, I would just add to that is that one of the things that we do with Division of Air Quality as the EPA agency is that we do operate the monitoring network that is throughout Cuyahoga County. So the particulate matter and other types of criteria air pollutants that are regulated through the Clean Air Act are monitored through our network. And then that data is submitted to Ohio EPA. It goes through a quality control process. And then that data is then submitted to US EPA after it has been approved. And it is available to the public. And you can get all kinds of information and all kinds of data from there that goes back to the various areas where we're actually collecting real-time information and collecting the data from the neighborhoods and what we saw those days. And it includes everything from particulate to ozone to metals. Some of these sites are monitored on a 24/7 basis. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those are continuous monitors and we're getting the data. And then other types of pollutants we monitor on an intermittent basis. So many times per week, so many times per day, we have to collect the data.
Okay. So just for my understanding, where exactly are the monitors placed? And if, say, one neighborhood has a higher poor air quality count that they're dealing with, and the monitor's far away, like how can that information be reflected at some point? Is there a way for residents to gather this information themselves? I know there are individual monitors that residents can purchase.
Yeah, so the data, that is one of the ongoing challenges or things that we need to face, is that in terms of where is this data collected. The data is not on every neighborhood block. It is spread throughout all of Cuyahoga County. So one of our main sites is, if you're familiar with where the post office is on Orange Avenue outside of downtown Cleveland, that's one of our main sites where we have multiple different types of monitors that are running. And then we have others that are in Berea. We've got one in Tremont. So they really are located in different locations throughout the county. How it's determined is about a 200-page book that goes a little bit beyond my actual, understanding or my skill set of how you actually do that. But they're population-based, and proximity to certain pollutants is how those sites are determined. There is a site selection plan that has to be approved through Ohio EPA, and that is also available publicly so that you can see the exact locations of the monitors, and that's available on Ohio EPA's website. But in terms of the neighborhood level data, this is something that we're really interested in being able to pursue. People might have heard recently about the use of low-cost air quality sensors. Low-cost air quality sensors are great tools to actually be able to capture neighborhood level data. So they have them available for particulate matter. There are multiple models out there. The challenge that we run into with the low-cost sensors is that they are not quite at the same accuracy level as the units that we have operating within our network. These are federal monitors that have gone through rigorous testing to ensure their accuracy. However, they still have a role to play. They can show us that, hey, there is something going on within this community. We're seeing higher levels here. They can tell us that, oh, there's a spike that happens at such and such time. Maybe we should go see if that monitor is located next to a facility, and if that facility might be releasing emissions at such and such time each day. So they can give us cues into the community as to what's going on. It's really important, though, to know that these monitors tend to read at higher concentrations than what is actually in the air. So they do a pretty good job, depending on the model, of picking up patterns that's occurring and like showing you spikes, showing you that type of thing. But not all of them have approved correction factors. So not all of them have gone through the analysis of comparing them to one of the federal monitors to see where it is within like the terms of how close is it reading to that monitor. So they still they provide us cues. They're good education tools, and they can show us, hey, there is something going on here. We need to take a look at it. And that is, those sensors, they range anywhere from $200 to a couple $1,000s.
Okay, and unfortunately, that price range is that cost is out of a lot of people's price range. So this is where.
And we do have a few that are available. We do have a few particulate monitors that are available. If there's anybody listening in on today's session that would be interested in getting a better understanding of the particulate matter from a low-cost sensor in their community, we could potentially help you with that. Another program that is available is Region 5 EPA. They have a lending library. And so they have all kinds of monitors available that they loan out. The time periods vary. It's really, you work out a loan agreement with Region 5 EPA, which is located in Chicago. But I could get anybody who would be interested in that. I could also get you contact information for who runs that program. Because you're right. It's, it might be low cost to us, but for the average person, it's not. So.
Right. But then this is where organizations like ours come in, where if we're talking about being able to provide resources and meet people's needs, then if we need to apply for a grant or, tap into our own resources and work with residents on making items like this available, then that's what we're working on. And I will say that we have a couple of very, very driven and passionate residents in Ohio City that are doing just that. So again, the resident-led projects is really what's going to keep, kick this in motion. It has to be done by the folks that live in the community for it to really be effective and impactful. We want to support things like that. So,
and we want to support, if there's a way for us to support it, we want to be able to do that too. So if there's, what does this data mean? Which is something that if they need, want to talk about and discuss what's going on, that is an area that we could absolutely engage with them on.
That's really good to know. That's good to know, because I think that as we're looking at these resident-led projects in Ohio City, some of the questions that have come up, like once we gather this data, so a couple of residents have applied for some funding, gotten a few small grants, and purchased some of these low-cost air quality sensors. And then the next question becomes, okay, once we gather this data, what do we do with it next? What's the next step? So I think that's important to know. So thank you for sharing that. Tim, did you want to add anything to that?
I think Christina got most of the details. I'll just say that there's the location of the monitors that she mentioned is based on EPA regulations, and monitors are going to be located at different places based upon the pollutant that they're trying to capture. So you'll see monitors for ozone in a different location than you'll see monitors for PM 2.5 or for sulfur dioxide, because the different pollutants have different characteristics. Ozone, for instance, is going to be something that's created over time in the atmosphere. It can drift for hundreds of miles, whereas sulfur dioxide is a point source pollutant, so we're worried about where it's coming out of the smokestack, for instance.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you both. I guess if we can touch a little bit on, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but let's delve deeper into it, the intersectionality between public health, air quality, and racial equity. So, when we look at, again, just the history of the country, we know that, and I don't know if the two of you have any numbers, any data, specific data that you can share with us, but, we've seen historically that when it comes to the healthier neighborhoods, as Tim was saying, less impacted by poor air quality, there's a huge, the word I'm trying to think of, disparity, is that a word? Between Black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods. So can we touch a little bit on that? Like, what information do you have to share regarding the intersectionality between public health, racial equity, and air quality?
So what I'll just start with is that I know one of the areas that we've been looking into a lot recently is cumulative impacts of pollution sources. And this tends to occur within your either minority communities or lower income communities. And what I mean by that is that you have one facility go in, then it's next to a highway, then it's next to this, and it's next to that. And so individually, the emissions may not be as much of a concern. But then when you have the combination of all of these sources together, that's going to be impacting that neighborhood at a higher level. And these neighborhoods tend to be, your Black communities or your lower income communities. And part of that has to do with looking at the different zoning rules that are in place. So for instance, if you have industrial use mixed with residential use, then you're going to have that higher impact in those areas. What we've been trying to do for the past 2 years, and we've started researching what is out there. Tim might have harder numbers than I do, but we have been looking at episodic events of different health indicators such as asthma attacks. Where are they occurring and what neighborhoods are they occurring? What we're also looking to do is overlay that data with emissions data. So what facilities are in the area? What are the emission levels? What is their proximity? And this is where we would need help with NOACA and Tim's team, their proximity to transportation data. So how do all of these factors come into play and impact those communities? And then having that data, how do we then either update local legislation or ensure that we have a better response to those communities in terms of making sure that all permit, if they have a permit, they can operate. That's the way the rules are right now. So if they do have a permit, what additional steps do we need to be taking to make sure that all those terms are being applied so that there isn't that additional burden that's placed?
That was a really good question. Tim, did you want to add anything?
Sure, just to piggyback off of that. We know that there's obviously significant racial and socioeconomic disparity in air pollution exposure and in the health impacts of air. Important to understand that it's not just the former, it's also the latter. So, for instance, Christina was talking about the impacts of transportation and how and where people live, and we know that non-white populations, so communities of color, are about 3 times more likely to live very near heavily trafficked roads, and those roads are a major impact, are a major source of pollution, and our people who live and grow up in those areas are far more likely to suffer the health impacts of that. And we also know that they're far more likely to live near sources of pollution that are not mobile. So those could be things like hazardous waste facilities. You know, we had the major issue with the Arco recycling facility in East Cleveland, where it was a facility to dispose of construction materials and things for houses that have been torn down directly outside of a neighborhood. And so we know from a lot of research that communities of color, especially, or communities that are going through kind of a demographic transition, are far more likely to be targeted for citing those locally unwanted land uses, and the people who live there will suffer the impacts as a result. But as I mentioned, it's not just the fact that people are exposed to a greater levels. It's also that because of you know, the layers of deprivation and of racial injustice and systemic racism that we have in our systems, the people, the communities of color that are exposed to those higher levels of pollution are also more vulnerable than they would necessarily be. And so you see instances where a study came out recently that concluded that Black men are 3 times more likely to die from fine particulate matter exposure over their lifetime than a white man. And it's not just because of exposure, it's also because they are far more likely to bear other health impacts due to systemic racism that's built up over time. And so we can't just look at one, but it is important to understand that the land use decisions and practices that we've put into place over the past several decades have had a major effect and continue to have an effect. And it's not something we're going to be able to solve overnight, but it's something that we need to begin to remedy immediately. And the cumulative impacts and assessment that Christina mentioned is one way to do that. But they had some luck doing that in Newark, New Jersey, and I believe the entire state of New Jersey is now doing it as well.
Thank you for pointing that out. That's an absolutely important factor, you know, when we're talking about air quality, especially in low-income neighborhoods, that people of color are affected by so many different things. The toxic stress is real. And if we're talking about air quality and trying to address it, then we have to address other factors as well that add to that, that toxic stress that people of color are living with on a regular basis. So we have about 20 more minutes. I wanted to maybe ask one more question, and you all threw some points out here already. Tim, you've added some links that folks can address or can access immediately. My question was going to be, how can the people that are watching this panel right now become more involved? And then also, how can residents who are dealing with poor air quality in their communities become more involved? And then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Okay, so I did already mention that one thing that we have available to us are a limited number of low-cost air quality sensors. If you're on this panel and interested potentially in helping host one of those monitors, you can reach out to me directly and we can have that conversation. I am trying to focus specifically on the city of Cleveland with these monitors, as that's where the need is most at. What we would like to do with these two is have them, if possible, hosted at other organizations. They need access to Wi-Fi and they need access to electricity. They're small, but they're about the size of a softball, but we do have them available. And I would be very open if anybody here is interested in potentially hosting one of those, speaking to you about what that might mean and going forward with that. The other thing I just want to keep reiterating is to please call our complaint hotline if you have a concern. That phone number is 216-664-7442. Please call us if you notice that something is going on in your community that air related, that is from a facility, that we might be able to help you address. Those are 2 areas right now that are open.
And if you can put that phone number, oh, excuse me, if you can put that phone number in the chat while Tim is giving us some information, that'd be helpful, Christina. Thank you.
I mean, obviously, I posted ways to get involved in our long-range plan process, and so I would encourage anyone who has not done so to do that. We've also been doing public meetings, and we'll continue to do some of those going forward, as well beyond the crowd gauge tool, because obviously this is something where we're trying to create a regional vision for 2050, and so without the public's input, we're really flying blind on that. In addition, I think it's important to consider that obviously, it's a unique situation now with COVID that so many people like us are working from home, but it's important to recognize under normal circumstances as well as under COVID circumstances that your individual travel patterns are heavily influenced by the types of decisions that your employer makes. And so whether or not your employer is located in downtown Cleveland, like the city Division of Air Quality or NOACA are, or in a really mixed use accessible location like Ohio City Inc., that directly affects your way to get around and how you get to and from work. Whether or not your organization has a telework policy in place determines how easy it is for you to take advantage of that in a situation like we have now, where your health is directly on the line. And so I would encourage people to speak with their employers to determine whether or not they have these types of policies in place. If they don't and they're looking for information on how to get them, to direct them to us, because NOACA is here as a resource for you to help you and your organization implement these types of policies about how can we provide subsidies for people to take transit, how can we do carpool parking, how can we set up a teleworking system, how can we make sure that employees who want to bike to work feel safe and secure and have access to the resources that they need to do so. Those are all things that we're able to provide, able to help you work through. They're all things that are a part of our commuter choice awards as well. And so that's one thing that a lot of people don't consider, and a lot of employers don't. Well, we locate where we need to be located, and then the employees will come to us. But then you find situations where you have, say, light manufacturers in Lake County, or manufacturers in Solon, who are wondering why low-income individuals from the city of Cleveland can't get to their work site to fill these open jobs. And the fact is that if transit service is not going to be connecting to you, and these individuals can't afford to have a reliable car every day, then you're not going to be able to fill those jobs. And so employers act upon how their employees get around and consider that, and we need to have more of those conversations going forward in this region. Ongoing challenge, and we know that probably no region has a bigger kind of jobs housing disparity than we do. We have so many jobs that cannot be filled because people cannot get to them because we have put them into green fields and exurban areas. And so it's something that we're beginning to have discussion. It's continue after.
Great points, Tim. Thank you. So I'm going to call on Patti from the Office of Sustainability. I think I saw a couple questions.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Yeah, we had an interesting question from
questions.
Yvette Mitchell, and I think this was touched on already, but she asks, within each of your organizations, how can citizens gain a seat at the table in order to be a part of the conversation and express some of their air quality concerns and solutions? I'll also kind of piggyback on that, especially given the current climate where some of our environmental regulations are being rolled back. Would our voices be more effective at the local, state, or national level?
Good question. So whoever would like to go first.
So I would say, like, in terms of getting a seat at the table here, I think one of the things that I really didn't mention, Tim kind of went over it for his organization. With COVID, a lot of our out in the community events have been, we haven't been doing them. So we haven't been doing public health meetings. We haven't been actually out and in the community. So prior to COVID, that was actually one of our tools that we would use, is we wanted to get into the community and talk to people directly and open that door for them. Wanted to be that open resource and provide that opportunity for them to connect with us, hear them, and listen to what is going on. Now, the complaint hotline number that I did provide in the chat function, it's a complaint phone number, but it's also kind of our general hotline. So that is also a phone number that is available that people can reach out to us. As we move forward, any opportunities that we have to update local legislation, we will be asking for community input. We did this a little bit last summer, or it was last summer, and we did get some of the great, and we continue to invite thoughts on this. Anything that we do determine will also be released to the public, anything updates that we would make. We try to stay engaged electronically now, although this is an unusual situation, but really what we hope is very soon to be getting back out actually into the community and engaging directly. As the last question, I think we only have 12 minutes. But when it comes to some of the other legislation, vote your conscience, vote for the candidate that you think is going to meet your needs and is consistent what you value. That's the best advice I can give. Locally and state and federal level, read their platform, and if it is consistent with your values, those are the people to.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Brett has a follow-up question for you. Can you ask Christina to mention the CAMP monitoring program, Citizens Air Monitoring Program?
Thanks so much, Yvette. We do have the Citizens Air Monitoring Program. I wish I had one next to me, but I don't. But what these are, they're evacuated canisters. So they're about this big, about the size of a gallon of milk. And what we use these for is if you have an air quality concern that tends to happen outside of our normal operating hours and tends to be odor related. What we do is we'll give it to the citizen, be trained on how to use it, and all they have to do is they open that up and it'll it'll capture about 5 minutes worth of air, so it'll draw that in, and then what we do is we send that off to Ohio EPA's lab, and they analyze what compounds are in there. If there is something that is above safe levels, then their toxicologist will work with us on releases and what steps should be taken. But we'll give that, like if somebody says at 2 a.m. every day, night, 2 a.m. on Tuesdays, I always smell this weird smell. That tends to be the type of situation that we give that out for. So
that's awesome.
I want to give Tim a chance as well to respond to.
I mean, it's important to remember that not just elected officials, but also civil servants like Christina and I work for you. And so we need to hear your voices on these issues. A lot of the times, I think what you'll see is that individuals at the staff level like us may be trying to push for certain policies or for certain ideas that we'd love to see occur, but without the type of, and this sometimes to individuals sounds like it's a cop-out from us, but without the type of public pressure and public input and engagement on these types of issues, it's oftentimes hard for us to get those things to actually see the light of day. And so if you are concerned about air pollution in your neighborhood, if you're concerned about whether or not you have access to transit or to safe sidewalks or bike lanes or things of that nature, that to do your best to reach out to your public officials, to email your council person, to take part in public meetings where possible. Although I know that that's not always easy, but hopefully in this era, it does seem like it's becoming a little bit more easy since folks can take part virtually. If NOACA has NOACA has committee and subcommittee and board meetings that are open to the public every few weeks. So please feel free to take part in those. We really look to the public to kind of to be the activists on this issue, to really push it forward, because I will admit, someone who's been working this issue for a number of years, it's really hard to get air quality on the agenda here. I was ago where they were talking about environmental policy proposals, and air quality wasn't even on the list. I came into the second meeting, I'm like, what? How is air quality not even one of your bullet points? And it continues to kind of boggle the mind, because we're on Lake Erie, that we focus on water so much, understandably, but air kind of gets public about and asking questions. Do it. Also, those officials are able to do a level at the same goal, in a situation where the back difference on part is how to do your
turn it over
So we've
to
lost your audio.
Mark to help.
We did. We missed about the last minute of what you were saying. It was going in and out really bad.
Oh. All right. Well, I'm sorry. That was
you have
just
to
kind of reiterating the same thing. But if you need any information, Christina and I are here as resources as well.
Yep. And Tim, I want to thank you for mentioning to everybody that we work for them. And so, yes, hold us accountable and hold our bosses accountable. Definitely, please, we welcome and need that feedback. So Tim, thank you for mentioning that, that we are very supportive of a lot of the policies that are occurring here. But when we hear the public interest, that really helps us push things forward internally. And we do it. I know everything is so critical in time, and these things don't happen overnight, though. And even if you don't hear from us in a while, that doesn't mean that we're not continuing to try to advance these efforts. So if you haven't heard from us about a specific issue, always call us, reach out to us. We're very open, or opening you up to Tim, but I welcome those types of calls, you know, whenever needed.
Thank you both so much. So that was quite a bit of information. So I'll ask Patti, will there be an opportunity to share information with folks after the summit?
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole summit is being recorded and should be available for viewing next week. We actually did have one more question come in our last 5 minutes, so let's address that. From Divya Sridhar. Can you please share if poor quality has an impact on high heat days? What kinds of advanced alerts are in place to help communities?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one. As I mentioned,
Yeah.
choose air quality advisories when we expect that air quality is going to be at dangerous levels. And we mostly expect that to occur in the summer months due to the fact that ozone requires a certain type of meteorology to form. It needs sunlight, not much. We do expect that. Not necessarily a linear relationship. At a certain point, heat doesn't actually make it more likely that ozone will form. That's like 95, 97 degrees too much, but there's definitely a correlation between the two. And we also see pollution levels when you have what are called inversion days or air stagnation events. So this actually occurred last fall in November when we had a warm front. And what happens is you have a warm front move in, and because hot air rises and cold air sinks, the cold air in place, and it keeps the pollution at the ground level and doesn't allow it to dissipate. And so because of that, we had our first pollution exceedance day for fine particulate matter last November in 5 years, I believe. And so there's absolutely a relationship. We also know that people who work outdoors are both more likely to be exposed to higher levels of pollution and higher levels of heat. A double whammy effect on children playing outside, or construction workers, or people, landscapers, things of that nature. And so there's certainly a correlation, and we would encourage anyone, as I mentioned, to use that link that I sent out to sign up for air quality advisories. We will send those out the day before we expect there to be an ozone exceedance. And we do our best to make sure that those get publicized within the media to populations in need.
Awesome. So much really good
Two questions are
information.
for you, Mark. I'm going to combine them only because we're getting closer
With just
to
about
the
3
end.
minutes left, are there any
The,
final thoughts,
one
any
question was, what
calls to
steps have
action that you'd like to put out for all of us today?
And then also, are you a for-profit business?
Whitney, let's start with you.
Okay. I will throw out there that if anyone is interested in climate change, climate action, we are hosting a panel discussion on October 20th at 6:30 p.m. And I can send Patti the link just because my typing is a little bit off right now. Well, my tablet that I'm doing this presentation from. So I'll send that to you, Patti. It's on Eventbrite registration, but we're doing a Zoom webinar. So 3 young men will be talking about their representation, and they'll be talking about the Green New Deal. What is climate change? What is the Green New Deal? How can you become involved? So, and I think as Tim was saying, and a meeting that you went to not too long ago excluded air quality in that presentation, which blows my mind as well when it comes to environmentalism. So I think air quality is definitely a big part of climate change. There's a huge correlation there. So I'll be sure to share that information with Patti so that we can get that to you before the session ends in 2 minutes.
Christina, any parting words, Tim?
Just parting is just want to say thank you everybody for jumping in on this or hopping in on this session. We appreciate you listening to us and being a part of the conversation. So again, I just cannot reiterate enough is that I have an open door. Feel free to always reach out if there's any way that I can help you in your community.
Thanks for the opportunity. I'll just re-push the links that I dropped about the crowd gauge tool, air quality advisories, and I just put a link to our Go High Commute platform, which is a great tool if you're trying to find information on how to get from point A to point B without driving, as well as you can kind of track your trips and see how much pollution you're saving, how many calories you're burning, how much money you're saving. So it's a fun tool to utilize to try to get people to think about how they're getting around.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. All right.
Patti,
Well,
I'm going to give this link to you really quickly. Can you type this while I say it out loud?
let's do it.
Okay. So https://green-new-deal-ohc.
I lost it.
You did? Okay.
Sorry. Start after the : /
Okay. It's Green New Deal OHC with dashes in between them.
OHC. Okay.
.eventbrite.com. And that's the registration link.
All right. With dashes in between Green New Deal, right?
-OHC.
-OHC.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, with
And
that,
that's all that I have. I appreciate all the information that was shared today, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate the air quality session.
it has been eye-opening and very interesting. And I just want to thank all of you especially the presenters for joining us today, all the folks that took time out of your busy schedules to hop in on the summit today. We can see that the climate equity, including air quality, is inherently entwined with racial equity. But it is encouraging to see Clevelanders leading the way into this like new frontier of climate action planning. So once again, special thanks to Cleveland Public Library for graciously hosting this year's summit and allowing us the use of this platform. We hope you enjoyed day one of the Sustainable Cleveland Summit, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
So just